Hey everyone, Ben here. In today's episode, I'm having Damian Boeselager with me. Damian is a member of the European Parliament fighting for progressive, pragmatic, and pan-European politics. This episode is special as we're not having a coach or manager, but a politician. I wanted to make this episode not only because I openly support Volt, but also because I think the way companies structure themselves and take strategic actions is very much dependent on the playing field made by politicians. It would be cool to hear from you whether you like this broader aspect of the podcast or you want to stick to the business side of things. Alright, this intro is way too long already, let's get going.
We tuned into the stellar work, expecting charts and plans. But Damian spoke of politics and brought us something grand. He's the very first map to grace this podcast stage, talking unity in Europe, ready to turn the page.
Hey Damian, welcome to the Stellar Work podcast. So glad you're here.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. You're the first member of the European Parliament that is on that show. So I'm very honored that I got someone like you on it.
You know, before I started with politics, I realized I didn't actually know a single member of the European Parliament by name. So I guess it's not super surprising. Yeah?
But the title sounds very fancy.
Super cool.
To be fair.
Yay!
All right, before we dig too deep into all the different topics that we want to cover, why don't you start and introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay, I'm Damian. I did study philosophy and economics a long time ago, and then I worked for McKinsey for a couple of years, and then I started Volt, a pan-European party and movement, since 2019 I sit in the European Parliament, so now it's the second time that I got elected in June this year.
All right. So what is Volt about?
So we started with Volt because we saw this rise of far-right populists or right-wing nationalism, whatever you want to call it. And very specifically, in 2016, I went for a master's program to the US. I did a master of public administration, which was fun. And the idea was to just hang out in New York and have 2 amazing years and make a lot of debt and then go back to McKinsey and pay it off. But what happened is that in 2016 you had the Brexit referendum and you also had the campaign of Trump and Clinton when I arrived there. And a friend of mine took me to the campaign center of Hillary Clinton for the election night, and I saw 30,000 people celebrating that Hillary Clinton would soon become president. And then, of course, it came differently, and they all started sitting down and crying. And so, for me, that was quite a shocking moment to see 30,000 people around me crying. And with this in the Brexit referendum, I started talking with some friends, like an Italian and a French friend, and we were thinking about what can we do to stop this trajectory in history that somehow these right-wing populists become stronger and stronger. And then we thought about a think tank and all this kind of stuff. And then in the end, we thought, okay, if the problem lies in politics, why don't we also enter politics and try to build the exact opposite of these right-wing populist parties, which is like a fact-based European party.
Many would argue that the opposite of a right-wing nationalist party is a left-wing non-nationalist party.
I wouldn't think so, because what you see in Germany, for example, right now is we have a left-wing populist party, and they're equally shitty. I don't know. I don't want to compare their shittiness, but I think what for us is important is we are for European collaboration, and these people are not. They want to bring back the national identity as the one driver of politics. They want to differentiate themselves against migrants. This kind of closed-minded, let's bring it back to the nation-state kind of perspective is what really we fear, and of course also the anti-democratic elements that are part of it. So if you want, we are pro-democratic or pro-democracy, pro-European, fact-based, pragmatic, progressive movement.
So just for explanation, why is it so bad to have like a nationalist Austrian politic? Because I've seen that Trump is winning the elections by saying making America great again, make America first, raising tariffs. And he won the election, so that must be what the people want, right? So why is it bad?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like if you just look at it and say, it's always good what the majority is currently like tending towards. I mean, you could lay back and say, things are going the way they should. I see it differently. I think the political leadership in Europe and also specifically in Germany has failed to continue to think into the future and where we need to go. And like if we don't do anything, what will happen is exactly as what you said. People will close their borders and they will stop to trade with each other. They will close their borders towards migration, also labor migration, and then our economies will fail. But let me say it very differently. The solutions that right-wing populists bring forward are not solutions. Like they will not actually improve any of the issues. Yeah, like be it. I mean, you can go through all the issues that we see, be it economic issues, and we will talk a bit more about that. I understand, but also even the topic of asylum or yeah, I don't know, like almost any issue. So if you currently look at the challenges that we have, they are all bigger than one European country. Maybe Trump, you could still say, okay, maybe there is a logic that will actually help the US. I don't think so, but at least it's a huge economy. In Europe, we have our states are so small and so irrelevant on the geopolitical landscape that we will just all be falling apart and dissecting. We won't have markets. I mean, our nations are an illusion if they think that they can be. I mean, they're actually not functioning on their own without the European Union.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because what I hear Volt is saying is that we should really unify the European Union and the member states and get closer together. And people would compare this to the USA, which is a unified state, right? They are the United States of America. They share a bunch of things, starting with the language, starting with different tax rights and so on. It's very easy to invest and get the bigger market if you start a company. So I saw you posting on LinkedIn very much about making Europe a competitive again against, let's say, a US or a Chinese market that is also thriving with tech. And I saw you supporting different movements like the EU Inc. I wonder what is your personal take on what we should do as Europeans to really be competitive again regarding economy and technology?
I love to answer that question just because you started by saying we want to really unite Europe. Let me just say it with an example very quickly, and then I come to the economy. But
sure.
Our nation states, most of them were like an idea of some people to overcome small kingdoms and fiefdoms, if you want. So it was already created as an overarching idea, and that was very useful because we could get rid of all these little duties of when you pass with your horse carriage to the next village, basically. And now it's just a question of trying to do the next step because we have a lot of stuff that affects all of us. And we can either decide about this stuff by sending our little lords and ladies, or we call them prime ministers now, into a castle to barter our deals, or we do it with a democratic or with a parliamentary democracy model, basically saying, hey, we have some stuff, and that's not everything. It's a federal system. Just some stuff we have to decide together on the European level. How about we do that in the same level we take decisions on the local, regional, and national level, which is via elections and coalition governments or democratically elected governments. That's literally all that we are saying. It's not much. So we could even decide less on the European level. But what we decide should be decided by an elected government that is elected by the parliament. That's simply put Volt's vision. But on the economic side, I think that here we have a couple of things to look at. The first one is market size and ease of scaling. And here I think the problem is that a lot of us still think cross-border. We think, can we work cross-border with France, cross-border with Italy or whatever? what we should really understand is this is an interior market. There's no border in between these two markets, and any form of red tape or like issues that can stop us from scaling into any of these markets, we should really try to reduce. And I think we are only at 10% of our potential. You talked about language. Volt has been asking from the beginning to have English as an additional official language in all EU member states. Not for people to be able to speak, but for you to be able to hand in your documents in English if you want to. Not because I like English, but just because it's our it's the main business language. So stop whining about it and just make it possible to have less bureaucracy. You talked about the EU Inc. It's the idea of creating. So how do I best explain this? For example, for corporate law, we have 27 corporate laws in the EU, which makes it super difficult. I talked to some VC investors recently, and they said, I don't really know in Estonia if I invest what my rights are as an investor. Like, I kind of know, and then I have to ask some friends who already invest there, and then I have to find a law firm that really explains it to me. But their business models are their governance is slightly different. But it will be very hard to harmonize all corporate law across the European Union. And so what the EU Inc. is, and basically there's a broader term for it, is to say hey, how about we build a 28th version of a corporate law that is automatically compliant with all the national regulations. And that is basically the idea of the EU Inc. It's the technical term is a 28th regime. Why 28? Because we have 27 member states or countries in the EU, and the 28th would be the European one. And you don't force companies to take the European form, but you allow it and make it so attractive that it works. But this 28th logic could be used for a range of things. And then you come to the third issue that I just want to quickly mention is, and that is what I'm working on a lot at the moment, is the whole question of what are we basing our state intervention on? And at the moment, I fear it is very, or like industrial policy, I don't like the term, but it is very much focused on, hey, how do we keep our old companies somehow in the game? How can we create regulation to merge them further, make them bigger, and maybe become competitive on the European level? And I really don't like that. For me, that's a very French way, and I love France, yeah. But in terms of industrial policy, a very French way of looking at competitiveness. And I think the right way would be to say, where are the innovators, and how can we unlock their potential, and what's the state's role in that?
Yeah.
And we talked about one, regulation or compliance. I think there's the first one is idea generation. The second one would be capital availability. Third one, talent availability. Compliance, as said, then infrastructure, and the last one would probably be competition law. And these 6 elements is what I'm currently looking into.
I wonder, when I'm listening to you, it sounds like a super nonchalant, easy idea that we should have came up 10 years ago already. Like, if I look at the EU Inc., it just sounds very natural to me to have something like that. Why are we now talking about it and not 10 years ago? Is there any argument against it? It just sounds good. I can't find a point against it.
Yes, so the issue is that unifying our laws at that level, corporate law level, becomes in a way it could feel very intrusive. So I think so far we have always focused on harmonization. So basically saying look, we should have the same kind of rules in all EU member states. And to be honest, I still believe that this would be beneficial, and not to add another layer, but it's not really a layer, a parallel scheme, but to just unify the systems. But here you run into cultural issues and national egos. And so far, people, especially national politicians, and that's also a reason why we created a European party, national politicians haven't really understood that sometimes it's better to give some national culture in terms of corporate law, not in terms of whatever, up in order to have a European benefit. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I think 3/4, 3/4 of VC investment in Europe is first national. So basically, we don't really have a European market for venture capital. So that these are all issues that we see. I think the answer to your question is national politicians don't want to give up national solutions because then they also fear that they lose influence.
And another reason why people would not, like a VC or a PE, would not invest into Europe is because of its regulation claims. There are so many memes all across the internet about how the US is innovating and the EU is regulating. And I wonder what is your take, or what is maybe Volt's take as well on the issue of regulation? Are we overdoing it, or is there a benefit to it that we just don't see?
So I think I'm always a bit bored by the more is worse and less is better, or the other way around. Yeah, I think it's a typical left-right fight that I find lacks complexity. We just talked about harmonization. Harmonization of corporate law, if you wanted to do it, you would have to regulate by, bring up a regulation on the European level that would simplify corporate law all across the European Union. So that's just one example where more regulation could help to simplify. Then there's a second point. I worked on a law that's called the Data Act. It's about who owns the data in the Internet of Things, or like how do you transfer ownership like rights to owners of connected devices. I think it's a super important law. Anyways, the law is maybe clarifying a bit who can share data and monetize it, and I think it can be market building. But I constantly had to fight over people making it too complicated. So the law itself now, in the way it's written, could again require a lawyer to really understand it. And I think good laws should not require a single lawyer for you to be compliant. So there's also smart regulation, or smart state also means writing laws in a way that the effort introduced by it to be compliant is minimized. So there's also an element there. And then there's a question of regulatory burden in general. Maybe the policy aim of knowing how much CO2 a company is emitting could be something that we would generally support, because it's a negative externality that needs to be internalized into the cost structure or whatever. And then the question is, but how do you do it, and who has the burden of reporting? Is it maybe the state that could check, or does it have to be the company itself that has to do it? So I think there's a lot of stuff, but one reason why we look at it right now is because our economies are really not innovative enough. I think there was this Italian guy Draghi, I don't know if you saw this, who wrote a report on this and so on. So there's a lot of thinking about that right now, and my aim is a bit to make sure that we, as I said at the beginning, don't fall into the trap of just saving current industries without looking into who can make us competitive in the future.
Yeah, I think maybe that could also be like a cultural thing that we do, because we tend to look out for the heroes, and it's really hard to diversify and really see the diversity within the startup market, to see like many different companies that could end up as a market champion. And we much rather put all our eggs in just one basket. Like, I don't know if you probably have seen the discussion around the company called Lilium in Germany, right? And everyone on the liberal side of things who was voting for, the market should regulate itself and the state should not intervene, suddenly became someone on the side of things of, the state should definitely intervene. It should definitely put all the money and effort into that single company. Even VCs who know the strategy of diversifying and distributing risk now argued for, that is the one company that we should put our money into, even if they already pulled it out.
I find this debate highly interesting at the moment, because
one more thing. We had, and I think we had the same issue with Airbus, right? So Airbus as a European project, and everyone was putting all their money and effort in that. So we had like that one single champion that could overrule the market instead of diversifying and really looking out for many different ways of investing and many different horses to set into the race. I think we have that. Don't you think we have a cultural thing that goes along with it?
So I think, to be honest, that the Germans and Nordics, as I can see, and the Brits in the past were more on the side of saying, hey, we have Mittelstand, we have small and medium-sized businesses who are champions, but they're champions not in the sense of like being one huge conglomerate, but like they own a very niche but very highly successful, market share somewhere. Whereas like there's a more centralist approach, which typically is more Spanish and more French, I would say, in saying that we need large conglomerates such as Airbus to be successful. And I think our ordo-liberal perspectives of the role of the state, they're running a bit into limits. And that's interesting for me because I am, by definition, an ordo-liberalist. I would probably say that part of this this framework that we have to take into account are social and environmental boundaries. Yeah, like when you come to the boundaries that we have, like planetary boundary questions. But it's still a framework. Like I really think that companies need to be able to fail, and others need to be able to come up. And that's why I'm trying to reduce the barriers to entry, to make it as easy as possible to jump onto the entrepreneur's journey. That's basically what I'm up to at the moment. But you have issues that somehow destroy this logic. The first one is always quoted is in an iPhone, there's around 80% of the components have some DARPA, like some American DoD, like Defense Ministry spending in it, in the foundational research, or even at later stages of development. So how do you deal with the fact that one of the most competitive products is very much state kicked off? I don't know how to say this better, like started off with state funding.
Came out of state fund research, at least.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, then the easy ordo-liberalist answer would be, of course, we need to spend much more on fundamental research. And then you come and look at Horizon, our program to do that, and you realize that on patents, we're not so bad. So that it's more, actually, in the transition from patents into technical readiness levels that are somehow viable to enter market, so then we founded the EIC, which holds the European Innovation Council, which actually gives equity. But that's also weird because now suddenly the state is doing that. So then you have the EIF, which is trying to cover later stages with equity as a fund of funds, or the EIB, which is trying to bridge with loans, and you're a bit like, okay, but that's now, is this still ordo-liberal? I don't know, but maybe. And then you're thinking, okay, but still we have far too little capital available. So of course we can go into the direction of unlocking private sector capital with the Capital Markets Union. This is something I'm pushing, but it's very slow because of national egos again. But so I think and then you look at China, the other competitor that you mentioned earlier, and you see that there's a lot of state fund involvement in a lot of the industries, and a lot of subsidies, and a lot of trying to circumvent European regulation, for example, when it comes to customs and so. So you're a bit like, yes, I want this ordo-liberal framework, but I also can't be naive about economies of scale, especially in the data and innovation, in anything that is that benefits massively from scale, as is data and artificial intelligence, but also in other areas. I mean, you mentioned Airbus. I guess without Airbus, there would only be Boeing. Yeah? So, what is the solution? And I think the Draghi report tries to get a bit more into this complexity of saying, when do we actually benefit as customers in Europe from state funds for Chinese products, for example? So there could be, if you look at it from an economic perspective, there's some customer subsidy, like we get very cheap products as customers, amazing. We should first of all be happy. And in some areas, this crowds out European suppliers or European producers. And in these areas, maybe then we have to reshift. And then you have to think about what are the tools as a state that I use. Sorry for making it so complex, but like, what are the tools? Okay, tariffs, like some protectionist measures, or is it more subsidies and fundamental research and so. So with all of this landscape out there, it becomes, and this is my current thinking, it becomes more complex than to say, this is the role of the state. But I will always tend towards saying fundamental research, yes, maybe, some transitional financing to kick things off. Yes, but then let's also focus on really reducing, as you said, also regulatory burden and the burden from moving from one country to the other. Let's make it super attractive to international talent to work in the EU. That's something we can definitely do much more. Let's try to unlock capital with the help of the Capital Markets Union and go more in these directions. But I'm just saying it's not as simple.
Yeah, I heard you saying that we should be very precise on when to intervene as a state regarding tariffs, taxes, whatsoever. I wondered, what I have learned at university was that each form of tariffs or everything that regulates markets will ultimately decrease the overall economic growth on our planet. So what I learned is you should open everything up until it really becomes a problem. But you should be open for that competition, so you have that fluctuation. And when I think of that, which would be a ultimate liberal crazy ass fantasy, I know, but if I think of that, I'm looking at Saudi Arabia having oil, China having cheap labor and very unregulated technology that is going on there. I see a bunch of really bright minds, software developers in the US. I wonder, what do you think do we have as Europeans as a unique feature that could really make us competitive again? What is our strength on your perspective?
Yeah. So, I think you're talking about the Ricardo theorem or whatever it was. Like, everybody has a competitive advantage somewhere, and then everyone benefits from trade. Yeah? Mm-hmm. I do want to, before I answer your question, I want to say one thing. All of these theories, they build on the assumption of a level playing field. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what I was trying to say earlier. Like, of course, if everyone would be having the same rules, the same regulatory burden, the same subsidy availability, the same kind of social system structure, of course, then you could just not have any rules and everybody would be like basically working on an equal playing field, and then maybe countries would specialize according to Ricardo. Yeah? That's great. But the point I was trying to make earlier is we are not in such a world. We are in a world where there's heavy subsidies, both in the US and in China, where we have decided for a social liberal, hopefully a model where basically we make sure that no one is left behind. We have whole industries that are completely dependent on European interventions, such as the agriculture industry, which is basically following, if you want, in the best case, a strategic priority of ensuring food security. I think there's much more behind that, to be honest, than just that premise. But anyways, you have cohesion. I'm just saying the market is very far away from being a level playing field at all. Like, we are much more in a much more complex situation. So that's just a given. What are we good at? I think, for me, it's clear that we are moving more and more in a direction where high education, lifelong learning, where talent, where people, where thoughts are the prevailing, resource. There's a lot of fun, which is important, and raw materials. It is getting a bit in this direction. At least I think from our side, that's where we are very strong. I talked about patents earlier. So IP, we are very good. Yeah. I think that if you look at the programmers that you were talking about in the US, how many of them are European? We have a range of PhDs. I think we have a very interesting social system. So if you, I talked to entrepreneur from Munich the other day, and he said, like, look, if I had to invest in any of the systems, China, EU, and the US long term, I would always think that Europe is easier to make successful than any of the other systems. Why? Because the US is running into a political, very difficult situation with low social justice and like potential conflicts everywhere. Internally, not externally. Internally, it's like it's such a tense society with such an unfair distribution of wealth that it has, if I think about a 50 to 100-year perspective, a much higher risk factor from an investor's perspective, not short term, but so. And China, it's the same. Like the system now with the current president, like abolishing the succession principle that was created. The only currency is not anymore meritocracy as it was actually the weird Chinese system, but it's turning into loyalty. Because and then once the succession hits, it will completely, or could not, maybe not in this succession, but maybe in the next of leadership could also become unstable. So the question is, if you really look at what we have in Europe, we have still, it's also changing a bit, and that's why Volt is active here, but we still have strong democracies, we have strong systems where people are not left behind and where everybody gets a chance. So there is a lot of potential here. Sorry.
Yeah,
not very
sure.
economic, but it is. I think it has an economic component to it.
It has, and it's very interesting because like you would see a very different argument or a very different side on the argument from a VC or a PE perspective. So they are not seeing the EU as a chance to invest. The people who are investing, or at least the ones that I talked to, invested with the mentality of buy low, sell high, right? They look at the European Union and they go like, well, it currently doesn't look really good, but there is potential in it. And they look at it more from a risk-return perspective, right? I never heard the argument that a higher social justice or that democracy is ultimately increasing wealth. Like I get behind it because that's what I wish to live in, right? I really want to believe that. But when I look at GDP growth, not at GDP growth. When I look at what social media is telling me GDP growth looks like, right? When you go onto X, when you go onto Blue Sky, when you go onto LinkedIn as well, you would see the crazy ass technology that is going on in China. You would see that how the cities are evolving, the robo taxis that are going on there. You would see the US and what Trump is promising. He still has to deliver, but what he's promising. And they just look at Europe and still have this picture in their mind of standardizing cucumber sizes and going around with that 100-year-old joke, I guess, right? So I'm still confused why not VCs or PEs would take that stance and invest accordingly.
I think there's always the saying that democracies are building on something that they can't create. I think that's much more true for economics or economies. Economies are fundamentally dependent on justice systems to work, on information about who owns the land, and it's really like you need a fundamental order. It's true that this order can be created by autocratic systems, and this is what China, I think, showed. But I'm still unsure whether this is a long-term thing, or whether at some point it's not. And in addition, as you also said, like our wealth is not the only factor of happiness. Like being very rich but not being able to criticize your government might make you a bit unhappy. Being very rich but seeing that your neighbor is deported for looking differently might make you a bit unhappy. So like these are things that I think we should also take into account. But even if we look from a purely economic perspective, Brexit, far-right populists create economic loss. And I think this is something that we will see with the protectionist agenda that Trump is pushing forward. You will I believe in open trade, as you also said in the beginning. I think we will see issues, and we will see decisions that are not economically viable being taken because of populists and their promises to to their people. I mean, just a random example, but I recently went to Albania to look at the Italian refugee camp that they built on Albanian soil, Jada. It's 1 billion euros spent on a camp that could easily be also somewhere in Italian soil, because it's a complicated thing, but like in the end, everyone who goes there will always go back to Italy anyway. So it's like it's a really weird thing. But imagine 1 billion euros. Yeah, 1 billion euros you could spend as a state on a lot of things, and even, let's say, better integration and maybe being more attractive for the national talent. Yeah? So I think there's an intricate connection between politics and the economy. And maybe a last point on this, I think what we're really lacking in Europe from a political side to create investor confidence and to make it possible for people to not run across X, LinkedIn, and so on to post about how shitty everything is. I think what we really need is political leadership with a vision where Europe is heading. I think after the Second World War, we had some visionaries who built the current European Union and who worked towards this, but this stopped 20 years ago or so, when somehow people thought, now we have reached the end of history, the socialism project has failed and we have prevailed, and we stopped thinking ahead. And now that's, I mean, sorry for like bringing this in again, but this is where our vision really comes in to say, like, it can't be that the only vision for change in our societies currently is to go back to the past of nation states. That is really dumb. We should create vision and visionary leadership also on how Europe can unite and how this can be working for everyone. And that's, I think, where that could also create investor confidence, because you believe in a future project. You believe that tomorrow is going to be better than today, but you have to have somehow some form of confidence creating political leadership to get there.
Yeah, 100%. We talked about these big ideas and those big visions, and I want to get down a little bit on the day-to-day things. What is your next step? Like, what is the next thing that you are fighting for improving in Europe or in Germany?
So the next,
when you look at your calendar, maybe next week, maybe today even, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, what I was working on yesterday with my team, and that I'll also work on next week, is that I'm like a vice chair of the econ committee. So like basically working in economy, if you want to make it very simple. And I'm also there in this committee, the guy who leads the perspective on the next budget. And the next budget is not just a yearly budget, but it is the MFF, so the multi-annual financial framework. So the basically the 7-year budget of the EU. And I think that for me is the next really big thing to look at. Because currently we spend 1/3 of our EU cash on agriculture, which I think is crazy. We spend 1/3 on cohesion, which is basically regional development, and there's a lot to be improved there. And then we spend 1/3 on the actual stuff, creating competitiveness, if you want, like the horizon, like fundamental research, and all these kind of like digital Europe, even like the trains connecting Europe facilities, so like stuff that is actually helping us to become more competitive because they're European public goods. And my goal here is to really ensure that this third becomes better invested, that we even think about how we can increase that share of the budget, so that we basically drive innovation. And as I said earlier, also in a way that not just big companies are benefiting from it, but that we reduce, or like that we make the founder's journey easier on all the elements that we have been talking about. So very concretely, I'll sit next week again with my team, and then we will try to influence, or like basically build the position on the budget, on the long-term budget. Yeah, that's one concrete thing. I'm also working a lot on data marketplaces, industrial data marketplaces at the moment, and then I'm also running for the German Parliament. So there's some things.
Do you sleep? Do you sleep? Maybe on Christmas, a couple of hours.
My dream is to relax a bit over the Christmas break. I'm still considering to also quickly at least go So my partner is Canadian, so she will be there for a month in Canada, so to at least go there a bit and chill. And that's nice because it's a different continent. The only problem is what they're currently talking about is that Trump has said that he also wants to create tariffs towards Canada. Canada is 100% dependent on the US. Again, another example that far-right populists are really affecting a lot of negative change.
Yeah. Hey, Damian, thank you so much for coming on the show, despite all of what is going on around you, despite all the different projects that you've been working on, for still making it happen to come on the show. Thank you so much. I'm really rooting for you. I really like the vision that you pointed out. If people want to join the debate, if people want to criticize, or if people want to support, where do people find you? What would be the best place to have an argument?
Actually, yeah, across all my social media or emails, also online on the Parliament's page, so you can always reach out, no problem. I read all of that myself as well, so feel free. LinkedIn is currently a bit overflowing because of German politics, but I would love to also get your messages there. I think maybe one last point that I want to make, if you forget everything that we just said, and just remember one thing, it is please join a political party. And I repeat it because I find it so important. Please join a political party. And we are all thinking that the system that we created just continues. But at the moment, the only people that are really organizing themselves very, very well in political parties are extremists. And that can't be. The center of our societies need to go back into political parties with all the issues that are, part of a democracy. For example, that your voice is the same as everyone else's in a party congress and stuff like this. But please, think about joining any democratic pro-European party that you can see, and just go by. You can always leave again, but that would be my final plea.
Yeah, I can only support that. I was very frustrated with German politics, with European politics for a long time, and I was frustrated of being frustrated. And then I joined a party earlier that year. I was also posting publicly on LinkedIn about it, so if you're curious, check that out. And I can only support everyone who's thinking of that, because you will get to work on politics within your community. You will have that group, and you can have an impact on the people directly around you. And that gives you so much more hope, or that gave me at least so much more hope, than I could go on X and watch all the right extremist, left extremist bullshit that is going on there, and it's not upsetting me anymore, because I know I can fix something right at the doorstep.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for the invite. Huh?
Yeah, thanks for being here. All right, thanks everyone for listening. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning into this very special episode. I'm really curious whether you like the broader perspective and view on politics. I really want to point out that I would be happy to interview people from any other party as well. It just happened to be easier to work with Volt, as they are very much aligned with what I do and very approachable in my neighborhood. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you're having a good start in 2025, and talk to you very, very soon. Bye.
We tuned into the stellar work, expecting charts and plans. But Damian spoke of politics and brought us something grand. He's the very first MEP to grace this podcast stage, talking unity in Europe, ready to turn the page. And the future's in our hands, can't let it slip away. A brand new wave of vision shining through the fray. Yes, the future's in our hands, come rise and make your stand. One voice across the continent, from shore to distant land. He witnessed Brexit heartbreak, saw 30,000 tears when populists won over minds by feeding on their fears. So he built a new tomorrow, a movement forged in hope, a pan-European party helping all of us to cope. Volt is forging brand new roads, bridging old frontiers. A bold idea, unstoppable, that's grown beyond the years. One language, fewer borders, one bright light shining through. For Europe's shared horizon, together me and you. Damian's got a vision now to simplify the law, A 28 solution so Europe can stand tall. Investing in young founders, cut that red tape tight, so the next generation can chase their dreams just right. Oh, the future's in our hands, a call for unity, to face the world together under democracy. The future's in our hands, so let your voice be heard. Volt's the place to gather, echo hope in every word. Join a party, shape the world, stand tall against the hate. Extremists thrive on apathy, tomorrow cannot wait. Yes, the future's in our hands, a bright horizon's here. With Damian on the front lines, we'll persevere sincere. The future's in our hands, a song inspired by Damian's guest appearance on the Stellar Work podcast, spotlighting the pan-European vision of Volt and our turn collective responsibility to shape Europe's tomorrow.
Damian's got a vision now to simplify the law. A bold idea, unstoppable, that's grown beyond the years. One language, fewer borders, one bright light shining through. For Europe's shared horizon, together me and you. Damian's got a vision now to simplify the law. A 28 solution so Europe can stand tall. Investing in young